Welcome into the Women's Basketball Podcast, your one-stop shop for all things WNBA, college hoops, oh so much more. If you're watching right now on YouTube on the OG Triangle Media YouTube page, you're seeing I'm rocking the hat, which can mean only one thing. Number one, coming off of a road trip with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Unfortunately, it's a 31-27 loss, but had a lot of fun. The 6 a.m. flight back this morning from Cincinnati, not awful, but, that's why we're rocking the hat, because we got a little bit of hat hair post-nap and ahead of tonight's ESPN show. I am recording this on Monday, September 15th, and I say I because, as you can tell, if you're watching on YouTube, Mitch Northam of SB Nation is not here. Why, you ask? Well, did we get some good news late Friday night? I'm in Cincinnati. Producer Dimitri, of course, at the homestead in the Triangle. I wake up the next morning. I don't know if Dimitri was awake or not, so I don't want to speak for him, to a text from 11:30 saying, so probably not going to make the podcast on Monday. My wife's water just broke. And so we are happy to report here at the Women's Basketball Podcast and at OG Triangle Media that we have an OG baby. We have a Women's Basketball Podcast baby. Shout out to the Northam Savannah Rose, born 5:39 a.m. on Saturday morning. And we are so happy that she is doing A-OK, because for those of you who've been following, she came about a month early. And so I know personally, I get that text from Mitch. A little worried when we didn't get a follow-up. So I texted him the next morning and said, everybody good? And he sends back a bunch of pictures and says, oh yeah, we're great. Everything is well. Mom and baby are doing well. So because we won't have Mitch today, we may not have Mitch on Thursday, or you may not have me Thursday and you may have Mitch. Point being, we wanted to do something different with the WNBA playoffs in full swing. The fact that we had games on Sunday, again, I'm recording this Monday. We will have games Tuesday and Wednesday in the opening quarterfinal round. There's a chance that some teams could be eliminated by the time you're listening to this podcast on Wednesday. We're going to drop it on Tuesday, hopefully, producer Dimitri, just so that we get this out to you guys ASAP. But point being that we want to make sure that we're following up with you guys each and every round of the WNBA playoffs and all of the storylines surrounding each of those matchups. And so what we're going to do, dropping an episode here ahead of the second half of the quarterfinal round of the first round of the WNBA playoffs. We'll probably be dropping another one, either myself solo, Mitch solo. Maybe we'll have a friend of the pod on. Oh, by the way, shout out to one of our fill-in co-hosts, Rebecca Kopelman, who got married on Sunday. That's why she's not here hanging out with me. We got a lot of things going on. Our friend Kevin Schwartz has a new job. We're excited to hear about that. And so it all kind of came together where we said, we're going to do a couple mini episodes to get you up to date on where things stand in the WNBA postseason, as well as the entire wide world of women's basketball. And so I wrote in the rundown here, potentially breaking news. And as I'm recording this at 6:26 Eastern, again, on Monday, September 15th, we do not have any update on what Breanna Stewart's injury that she suffered in game one of that opening round against the Phoenix Mercury is, outside of, according to Ramona Shelburne of ESPN, Breanna Stewart underwent an MRI today and additional testing in that left knee, which caused her to leave the Liberty's game one overtime win. As Ramona notes, this is not the knee which caused her to miss time this season. So it's the other knee for Breanna Stewart. Thank you to Ramona Shelburne for that report. And ultimately, it's a storyline that whether she plays or doesn't play, we saw the Liberty pull out a victory in overtime. We're going to get to the details of that one here in just a second. But ultimately, this brings into question, and maybe this is a good place to start as we give you our primer of these opening games of the postseason, the idea of our players being rushed through this season that can be considered truncated when you consider when the college season ends, when Unrivaled ends. Do these players have ample time in between games? Is there enough layoff? Should we be seeing more load management? Is it okay to risk injuries like this of Breanna Stewart, her second potentially significant of the season, and now at the most important time of the year, in favor of, well, we want to market ourselves at a time in the sports calendar year where we are the main attraction besides baseball, which baseball plays 162 games and we play a fourth of that. And so therefore we want to avoid competing with the NFL Sunday crowd. We want to avoid competing with college football, which is kind of funny when you consider all four opening games of the postseason took place up against an NFL Sunday. So that's going to be a story for another time that we're going to table. Want to get into each and every one of these games. First things first, If you're looking for just kind of a lay of the land, for the first time in the WNBA postseason, the first round, the quarterfinal round, will be a best of three. So, what is going to happen? You saw the higher seed hosting on Sunday because all four games took place on Sunday. You will see the lower seed. It's going to be the home and home, if you may, as opposed to playing all of those first round games at the site of the higher seed, minus perhaps the rubber match, if you may. You will see now the Atlanta Dream Indiana Fever series shift back to Indiana. The Minnesota Lynx Golden State Valkyrie series shifts back to the Bay Area. That is why you will see two games on Tuesday night and you will see two games on Wednesday night. But again, because it's a best of three, there's a chance, given what happened on Sunday that we're going to run through, there's a chance that several of these series could be done by the time you're listening to this podcast. We're on to the semifinals, which at that point in time, it is a best of five. Where things get different this year, the championship series will, for the very first time, be a best of seven series. It's interesting because I rooted for the best of seven storyline and playoff format all last year because the Lynx and the Liberty were so compelling in that championship series. We all wanted more. And ultimately, when you look at the men's side and you see the best of seven, you say it's only fair if the women also have that. But I'm not going to lie, folks, and maybe it was this year's NBA postseason. I felt like 7-game series were dragging on. And maybe that's because in the NBA, or the MNBA, as some of you call it, maybe because in the early rounds, you're seeing those 7-game series and the postseason is dragged out over a 2-month span. I'm very curious to see how this best of three, then best of five, then best of seven format works. And maybe if some other teams or other leagues, pick up on it and maybe start following a similar format. But let's get to why you're here. You're here for the games. Let's start with the top seeded Minnesota Lynx, who finished with 34 regular season wins, a franchise record, and a dominant 101-72 victory on Sunday over the Golden State Valkyries. A lot to dive into this one because while the final score was very, very lopsided, it was not so lopsided in the first half. The Valkyries were up 7 at the end of the first quarter. They shot 5 of 8 from three-point range in that opening stanza alone. The Lynx then outscored them 26-12 in the second quarter. Appreciated this shout from my colleague at ESPN Radio, Myron Metcalf. The Lynx, a 31-16 run after Natisha Heidemann entered the game with 3:42 to play in that first quarter. And all of a sudden, the Lynx start clicking on all cylinders. Heidemann finished with a career-high 18 points. And this is courtesy of Kendra Andrews of ESPN. A plus 32 plus minus, the second highest plus minus in Lynx postseason history. The Stud Buds, folks, they are about a lot more than simply a podcast. They are more than just a Twitch phenomenon. Natisha Heidemann has really stepped up her game, coming off the bench and being a reliable spark plug for Cheryl Reeve and company, and is just a further testament to how deep the Minnesota Lynx, last year's runner-ups, are in this revenge season. So, Natisha Heidemann goes off in this game. 9th 20-point playoff game in the last two seasons for Napheesa Collier, who, of course, it bears noting, also suffered an injury that kept her away from the game for an extended period of time this summer. She looks and appears to be healthy and good to go. 20 points, 6 boards. The Golden State Valkyries, as we know and we've documented on this show, they have faced an injury or two, several season-ending injuries. But Veronica Burton, who did win the most improved player in the WNBA today, stepped up once again on the biggest of stages, as she has throughout the second half of the season, following so many injuries to Natalie Nakase's first-year squad. And Veronica Burton finishing with 14 points in 34 minutes in this game. She had 3 steals, 7 assists, 5 boards, really stuffed the stat sheet. Again, the Valkyries started 5 of 8 from 3. They finished 9 of 31. And Natalie Nakase, the head coach, had some interesting comments. She was not really happy with the referees. Felt like her squad was maybe, not getting the benefit of the whistle. Felt like, we're up against an absolute mountain of a team. It's interesting, especially when you consider some of the headlines now coming out of the Bay Area, not just on the Valkyries beat, but I'm staring at a headline right now from Tim Kawakami, one of the more renowned columnists in the Bay Area. And straight up, the lead headline, Natalie Nakase is too good a coach to blame the refs after every big loss. It's too limiting for the Valkyries too. And so she was frustrated with the officiating, said she wants to do a better job of handling the mental part of the game, but of course, excited that the series will now shift back to Valhalla and the Valkyries will have a chance to even this series. And that, of course, is coming up. Let's make sure we get the right dates for y'all. On Wednesday. Tuesday, we will have the Dream and the Fever, the Aces and the Storm. And then Wednesday, the aforementioned Golden State Valkyries host the Lynx at 10 p.m. on ESPN. And then earlier in the night, the Liberty and the Mercury at the Barclays Center. Ultimately, from this one, some other highlights with regards to the Minnesota Lynx. Look, I think that this is truly the best roster left in the postseason. I know I mentioned last week on last week's episode, my pick to win it all is the Las Vegas Aces. We will get to them and their record 17-game winning streak. That's tied for the second best mark in WNBA history all time. But in terms of pound for pound, I don't know if there is a better roster with more cohesion than the Lynx. And it's such a fascinating case study, as we've talked about here on this show before, because ultimately they are not they are not your traditional basketball team. They do not have a back to the basket center. They don't have, well, here is their center. Here's the front court. Here's the back court. They are truly, outside of that point guard rotation of Courtney Williams and Natisha Heidemann, they are truly the definition of what basketball, both on the women's and the men's side, looks like in 2025. They got a bunch of monsters. The length is crazy, the height and the size, the measurables, the intangibles. It's exactly what you want because you have players who can guard 1 through 4, 2 through 5, and you can put them at different positions on the floor and in different lineups that in turn can overpower an opponent like the Valkyries, who are just simply undermanned when it comes to the playoff experience, let alone the actual talent on their roster. And so Bridget Carlton finishes just with 2 points, with 21 minutes. And again, 3 assists, 3 boards. Alana Smith, 9 points in this one in 28 minutes. Nafisa Collier, as mentioned, 20 points. Kayla McBride, 17 points. Courtney Williams, 11 points to go along with 4 assists. Jess Shepard. Honestly, we're going to go through the postseason awards and when they're all going to be coming out here in just a bit. If Jess Shepard isn't in the conversation for 6th player of the year, I'm going to have a problem with that. I know she didn't win most improved. Veronica Burton deserves it. Golden State Valkyries are doing things we've never seen an expansion team do in any sport. But ultimately, I think Jess Shepard and what she has done to not only come back from a significant injury, but also completely reshape her game, reshape her body. She's one of those players who, and I've said it before, when I covered her at Nebraska, back to the basket center, a lot of her strength was based in her lower body. She has evolved and she has become a player who now can be not only a stretch forward, you could play her on the wing. She can do so much for you defensively. And it's a credit to her and it's a credit to Cheryl Reeve and this entire staff in Minnesota and what they've been able to do with her over the last plus calendar year. Elsewhere for the Minnesota Lynx, yes, Natisha Heidemann, as we mentioned, with 18 points in 26 minutes and that franchise record plus 32 plus minus. How about Dejanay Carrington returning from an injury hiatus with 6 points in 11 minutes? That's a plus 20 plus minus. All 5 starters for the Minnesota Lynx also in the positive in the plus minus category. And so it's a ho-hum victory when all is said and done for the Minnesota Lynx at the Target Center. Curious what happens when they head out to Valhalla. And that game, again, will take place on Wednesday night. Let's keep it moving. As mentioned, the Las Vegas Aces are my pick to once again be the last team standing when all is said and done. They certainly started it off on a hot note. Final score from the desert, 102-77. It's the Seattle Storm's largest playoff loss in franchise history. For those of you who may be new to the game, they had a player named Sue Bird. They also used to be the home of Breanna Stewart. They've won a couple championships themselves. So for the Storm to lose 25 points, even with their back half of the season slide, the fact that they kind of backed their way into the postseason, it's still probably shocking, but it's not when you consider what the Aces are at this point. Again, 17 wins in a row. That is tied for the second longest win streak in WNBA history. A'ja Wilson, 22nd playoff game with at least 20 points and 5 boards. That is 4th all-time in WNBA history. We're going to dive into some stats for Seattle, too, because in listening to some of our contemporaries on some other podcasts, I know there's hope that Dominique Malonga perhaps can take another step forward when this series shifts back to the Pacific Northwest. I'm curious in that storyline. Elsewhere for the Aces, 3 of their starters in double figures, 4 of the Aces finished in double figures scoring to go along with A'ja Wilson's 29 points and 8 boards in this game. Jackie Young had 18 points, 7 assists, 4 steals. NaLyssa Smith continues her renaissance with 11 points, 9 boards of her own as the fifth member of that starting lineup alongside Kirsten Bell, which, look, I mean, 5 points in 15 minutes. There's going to be something to be said about what Jewell Loyd has meant to this team since saying, hey, I will be the sixth woman. I will come off the bench. Jewell Loyd finishing with 14 points in this one. She played 26 minutes compared to Kirsten Bell's 15. It makes no sense to me. And that's someone who covered Kirsten Bell when she was in college at Florida Gulf Coast. And to be clear, she was the most electric player in the conference. Physically, I know she's put on more muscle mass, and that's where I've questioned perhaps the speed that I saw when she played the likes of JU and UNF when I called those games circa 21, 22. But ultimately, even if she's only giving you 15 minutes and she's simply in the starting lineup just to get over this mental hurdle of we need to have Jewell Loyd come over the bench, if that's all that it is, it's working. And it's credit to Becky Hammon, who knew how to push all the right buttons and get the most out of this team. Dana Evans also in double figures. She had 13 points and 6 assists. And so finally, maybe we're at a point where we were not too long ago, where the Las Vegas Aces do have depth beyond their starting five. Maybe that's part of what this issue was once upon a time, that you had so much star power in the starting five, and then you just were asking role players to simply just slot in as an additional 5-man rotation, like a hockey shift. I don't really know how we got here, but what I do know is that the Aces are clicking on all cylinders. They did finish this game 14 of 29 from three-point range. If you recall, they set a WNBA record with 23 threes in the final week plus of the regular season. And so they continued their hot shooting from beyond the arc as well. For the Seattle Storm, also had 5 players in double figures. Nneka Ogwumike with 11 and 8. Gabby Williams added 16. Skylar Diggins with 12 points in this one. Erica Wheeler with 10. Shout out to the legend. She continues to age like fine wine. And then the Malonga of it all. The number 2 overall pick in this past April's WNBA draft finished with 12 points, 11 boards. She has truly come into her own since the All-Star break. Not sure what she did at the All-Star break. She obviously wasn't in the All-Star game because really was still getting her sea legs under her after coming over a little bit late following being drafted out of France. 19 years old. It was always going to take a little bit of time. The question is, can the female Victor Wembanyama create enough of a mismatch in the paint to give Asia Wilson fits, to give the rest of this front court for the Aces this rotation that is, quite frankly, besides Asia Wilson, kind of undersized with the likes of NaLyssa Smith, Megan Gustafson, Kia Stokes, a taller player, but perhaps a bit more challenged on the offensive side of the floor comparatively to those other two. And so I'm interested to see if it is an X factor. A lot of pundits nationally say that as Malonga continues to develop, that's the hope for the Storm. But as I've said time and time again on the Women's Basketball Podcast, my biggest question with the Storm, much like the 2025 New York Yankees, you brought together this ragtag team of a bunch of former All-Stars and said, we're going to recreate and rekindle that magic. And then we're going to slot in this nice little number 2 overall pick, who is an absolute freak, but also a project, to be clear. And while they clearly have hit on Malonga, not sure if it's going to result in the early returns they were hoping. And then let's take it one step further. While the series does shift back to Seattle, and this game, of course, with the Seattle Storm and the Las Vegas Aces, game 2 of the quarterfinal round will take place on Tuesday night in Seattle. Ultimately, if you get swept by the Aces, and I understand every team's going to deal with this once CBA negotiations are finalized or not at the end of October, what does this roster look like moving forward? Are you going to keep Erica Wheeler, Skylar Diggins, multiple guards on this team that perhaps, I don't want to say they've already eclipsed what was the peak of their career, but it is worth noting this is a team that outside of Malonga and Gabby Williams averages, the age is up in the early 30s. That is the median age for the Seattle Storm right now. And so I think the move for Brittany Sykes was interesting. She was held scoreless in that 102-77 loss to the Seattle Storm to begin postseason play. I think you're going to need a little bit more production out of her, even though, as we've discussed too, if Skylar Diggins goes off, Brittany Sykes is held scoreless and vice versa. Also a weird dynamic that needs to be sorted out. I think the Aces, once again, blow them out of the water, game 2 of this one, and they march right on to the semifinals of the WNBA playoffs. Game number 4 on a Sunday of absolute just great basketball, but also, the NFL being up against it is still kind of bugging me because I think that this is an opportunity for Kathy and company. They could have played these games either on Monday, and I know there's a double header on Monday Night Football on Monday. Maybe wait till Tuesday, where 2 of these games will be, then 2 more on Wednesday. Okay, that's maximizing the calendar year. I'm done with my rant. We'll get to it at a different time when Mitch is back on the pod. The number 3 seed, the Atlanta Dream, 80. The number 6 seed, Indiana Fever, 68. It is the first Dream playoff win since Mitchell Northam was covering the team back in 2018. Ultimately, this was a game where the horses for courses prevailed once more. It's not to say that the Indiana Fever at full strength would not have been able to hang with this team. I saw plenty of people on the timeline noting that if Caitlin Clark was available, if Sophie Cunningham was available, if this was the team that we thought it would be at the beginning of the season, minus DeWanna Bonner, maybe it's a bit more competitive. Outside of the 4-5 game, which we'll get to here in a second, where the 5 prevailed, this was easily the most competitive of the 4 games on the slate. Let's run through some numbers, though. For the Atlanta Dream, Alicia Gray continuing her MVP caliber season. She had 20 points, 6 rebounds, 4 assists, just a, cool, calm, collected night at the office. Ryan Howard also with 20 points, and Alicia Gray credited Ryan coming back from her injury and really forcing the energy to be kicked up a notch in the ATL. So Ryan Howard also with 20 points. That included a 4 of 10 performance shooting from beyond the arc. She had 6 boards to go along with 2 assists. Naz Hillman, 16 points. That reclamation project for Carl Semesco continues. She was 2 of 4 from 3-point range. Again, Naz Hillman had made, I don't have the stat in front of me, but I believe she had made like a grand total of 8 threes in her career, had attempted 20. That times 3 in one season alone with the Atlanta Dream. And of course, are we saying that they're raining threes in the ATL? Someone in the comments, let us know if that is still the case for the Carl Semesco-led WNBA outfit. Brianna Jones with 12 points in this one. Brittany Griner came off the bench, only had 2, but +4 in the plus-minus category. And ultimately, as I've said time and time again, a bad matchup for the Indiana Fever, regardless if it's the first iteration, the second, or the third iteration that we've seen this year, with the Fever suffering the most injuries that we have seen in the W over the last 5 years, tied for the most players, 19, to be rostered on a single season. Kelsey Mitchell led the way for the visitors, 27 points in this one. Only 1 of 4 from beyond the arc, perhaps a little bit surprising. Odyssey Sims with 10. Aaliyah Boston, 11 boards, or check that, 12 boards, but held to just 8 points in this one. You're going to need a bit more from the former number 1 overall pick if you are to defend home court at Gainbridge Fieldhouse, if you are to push this game to a 3-game best of all, winner take all rubber match. And of course, that game will be on Tuesday night. Excited to see what happens, because at this point in time, it's all gravy for the Indiana Fever. The fact that they won more games this year than they did a season ago when they had a fully healthy Caitlin Clark the entire season. 19 players have suited up for the Indiana Fever, and they still have the most wins they've had in 5+ years. It's a testament to, and I know this is going to be unpopular, it's a testament to Stephanie White, been able to press all the right buttons. You can argue amongst yourselves if she does better coaching this ragtag bunch than she did coaching the star power of the first iteration of this roster. But it's a credit to her nonetheless. And I do believe the Fever will give the Dream a run for the money. But dating back to May, when Caitlin Clark was healthy, this is such a bad matchup for the Fever, because the Atlanta Dream obviously shoot more threes than any team in the league. And when they're on, good luck trying to stop them. But then you couple that with Brianna Jones and Brittany Griner in the front court, this idea of, does the Fever, much like the Las Vegas Aces outside of the South Carolina Gamecock in their front court, have the height, have the size to compete with those 2 veteran players who are shooting the 3 way more than they ever have, but are still making their bread and butter in the lane. So the Indiana Fever will host game 2 of that quarterfinal matchup as the 6th seed after falling 80-68. And finally, the game of the weekend. Final score in overtime: New York Liberty 76, the Phoenix Mercury 69. Nice if you're a Liberty fan, but not so nice because Breanna Stewart not only went down in this game, but the fact that she went to her head coach, Sandy Borrello, and she said, hey, I got to be pulled out of this game. That is where my concern is. Even if Stewie returns for the semifinals, or if they make it all the way to the finals, and that's if they get past the Mercury, to be clear, although they will now shift that series to the Barclays Center in Brooklyn, the fact that Breanna Stewart pulled herself out of this game and then was sobbing on the bench, I'm fascinated to see, and maybe by the time you listen to this, we'll already have clarification on that MRI. It's in the knee that is opposite the one that kept her out with a knee injury throughout the course of the summer. I'm interested to see what the Liberty ceiling can be without Stewart in the lineup because she did play 40 minutes in this one. Again, it did go to overtime. She played the second most minutes of any player on her team outside of Sabrina Ionescu. But if she is limited in terms of availability, what does that mean for the ceiling of the reigning champions? Stewie did finish with 18 points, 6 boards in this one, 4 assists. Four players in double figures. Jonquel Jones hold to just 7. She was the only member of the starting 5 to not eclipse double figures. She did have 12 boards in this one. Think if you don't have Brianna Stewart, you'll obviously see a heavy dose of JJ in game 2 of this series. Natasha Cloud led the way with 23 points, 6 rebounds, 5 assists, 4 steals, has been on an absolute tear in the second half ever since the All-Star break when she won the Skills and Drills Challenge. Sabrina Ionescu back reaching her back and healthy, which is a good thing to see. 16 points, 7 assists, 6 boards for the Oregon product. And Leonie Fibach also with 10 points. What's interesting with the Stewart injury is just the reality that Sandy really doesn't go more than 8 deep with this lineup. And part of it, excuse me, is obviously injuries to Izzy Harrison, Niara Sabali. Like, I understand that there have been injuries that have limited the depth of the New York Liberty, but the fact that they do only go 7, 8 deep, they have the quality of players in that rotation that they can win a game. Obviously, they did so on Sunday. But if you don't have Stewart and you don't have those other 2 players in the front court, I'm curious what that will mean for the Liberty in terms of closing out this series on Wednesday night, but also moving forward. For the Phoenix Mercury, to be clear, it was a solid effort from especially Kalia Copper and company, although Kalia did go 0 of 4 from three-point range, still finished with 15 points. Started off hot, just cooled off, quite frankly. Alyssa Thomas, 14 points in this one. Tawana Bonner added 12 off the bench. Ultimately, 69 points in an overtime loss. Going to need a bit more offensive production to stop a team that has, when healthy, Sabrina Ionescu, Brianna Stewart, Jonquel Jones, just to name 3 of the New York Liberty's headliner players. That's not even including Cloud. And so here we are. These series will shift now to the site of the lower seed. Again, just to recap, Tuesday night at 7:30 p.m. on ESPN, the Fever will host the Atlanta Dream. According to ESPN Bets, the Dream currently 4.5-point favorites. You know I'm going to plug the other employer. The Las Vegas Aces travel to Seattle in the nightcap. They are 5.5-point favorites on the road at the Seattle Storm. I'm optimistic the Fever will make this a game. I would not place money on this game. I believe the Atlanta Dream are one of the 3 best rosters and three teams performing at the highest level right now. I would say the 3 teams that, in my opinion, to handicap it, are not only playing their best ball right now, they have the deepest rosters. It is the Aces, it is the Minnesota Lynx, and it is the Atlanta Dream. My concerns with the Liberty, of course, surround Brianna Stewart's availability, as well as the depth they will have moving forward. And the Mercury, on those nights where they're challenged offensively, this is a best of 3 and then a best of 5 playoff format. If you don't show up one night, that could significantly alter your chances of advancing beyond that, because this thing could be wrapped up Wednesday night and the New York Liberty could be moving on in the postseason. On Wednesday night, we will get the other 2 game 2s of the quarterfinal round. The Minnesota Lynx travel to the Valkyries. They are 10.5-point favorites at Valhalla. That game tips off at 10 p.m. Eastern on ESPN. And the Mercury travel cross country now to the Liberty, where the Liberty are a 2.5-point home favorite. That game, 8 o'clock Wednesday night on ESPN. And quite frankly, again, if I see the same Mercury offense that we saw on Sunday, I'd be inclined to take the Libs to close that one out quickly, which is awful considering how well the Mercury have looked at different points throughout the 2025 season. We will be back Thursday. We will have a full rundown of these games, whether it's me and Mitch. Rebecca may hop in because I know she's going to have a thing or two to say, because she's been in wedding planning wedding plan mode, and then she's in wedding implement mode. I know she's got to get her takes off. So we will have some friends with takes coming at you in your feed here, OG Triangle Media, on Thursday. Last call. Some other storylines that we do want to hit before we close out today's show. Angel Reese. Need I say more? Is it over? Or what's the Taylor Swift line? But is it over now? That's where we're at, folks. The comments from her GM, the comments from folks around the Chicago Sky, the fact that Angel took so much time in the Chicago Sky's finale to go around the court, shake hands, blow kisses to the crowd. And you could certainly write it off as, well, it's just, the final game of the regular season. It's been a disappointing season. She wants to support the fans. I think this is the tip of the iceberg. I know we led with it last week. It was our beef of the week last week. I believe it will be our beef of the week in weeks to come. I've spoken to a couple folks in a couple different locales who don't think that there are established super teams, i.e. the Las Vegas Aces or even the New York Liberty, that would be interested in her services because the concerns of what she would mean to a locker room. I think it rebuilds her image. I think it rebuilds her image. She's going to have to show that humility. She's going to have to be humbled. I do believe Angel Reese can continue to be an all-star in this league. She led the league in rebounding for a reason. But at the same time, in my estimation, it's either she goes to one of those expansion teams and she becomes the face of the team, or she has to go to a super team and be the fourth or fifth option and learn how to create her own shot and be a pro. It's that simple. Someone suggested to me last week on ESPN radio that perhaps the Golden State Valkyries could be a landing spot for her. I mean, Natalie Nakase is already facing an uphill battle, to her point, with regards to the refs, number one. But number two, the fact that she has a roster that isn't exactly loaded with natural talent and superstars. Would Angel Reese be a quote unquote superstar in terms of the off the court purview, perhaps, but I'm not so sure on the court. Although the emphasis on defense and rebounding certainly resonates with that squad, but she can't shoot the three, and they're going to shoot a lot of threes. So I am interested to see where Angel Reese and the saga that is turns to next. As I mentioned, we do have a list of when the WNBA postseason awards will be announced. Today's announcement was for the Kia WNBA Most Improved Player that went to Veronica Burton of the Golden State Valkyries on Wednesday. This one's kind of early in my opinion, but hey, we'll take it. The Coach of the Year will be announced on Wednesday, Defensive Player of the Year on Thursday, Sixth Player of the Year Saturday, and the Kia WNBA MVP will be announced on Sunday, which is also weird because then we still got the Sportsmanship Award, Executive of the Year. The Rookie of the Year is not going to be announced until TBD. At least we've got dates. We'll take the dates and we'll run with it. So going to be keeping an eye out for all of those awards. Maybe Mitch and I will give you our actual award winners, although Veronica Burton most deserving after a breakout season with the Golden State Valkyries. Want to shout out the ladies of the NWSL who are now sporting Pay Them What You Owe Them shirts with the WNBA PA logo underneath, obviously supporting the shirts and the cause that was on full display at All-Star Weekend in Indianapolis this summer. The CBA negotiations must be finalized by October 31st. Again, recording this podcast on September 15th. So, folks, we are inching closer and closer to that deadline. The postseason, if it runs its full course of a 7-game championship series, would wrap up on October the 17th. A little bit of news from the college ranks. Olivia Edwards, the number 2 player in ESPN's class of 2026, has committed to Tennessee. Big O to Rocky Top. Killa Kim does it again. Very fascinated to see how this player and her skill set translates to Tennessee. Good thing Mitch Northam, he's going to be back at some point in time, folks. We're giving him a little bit of paternity leave. I'm very fascinated to see for a Tennessee team. And again, Olivia Edwards won't arrive till 2026, but for a Tennessee program that Mitch and I have bought stock, we have them in our Final Four, way too early Final Four this upcoming season. And again, Edwards won't join them until the following year. But what this says is that Killa Kim's momentum is more than just being a bit on this program. Players around the country are recognizing that Tennessee is coming back. They are interested in the 10-man rotation, the idea of fresh legs consistently, the idea of maybe you don't play 40 minutes a night, but within your 20 some odd minutes, you are going to have an opportunity to be fresh and get after it on Rocky Top. Very interested to see how this continues to develop for Kim Caldwell and the Lady Vols. That'll do it. And producer Dimitri said, just go 20 minutes. We went 34. A whole lot to get to from that opening game of the postseason. Again, we'll be back later in the week with even more of a primer as we progress throughout the WNBA postseason. Until then, we'll catch you later. Deuces.